Welcome to the Blockbusters and Birdwalks podcast. I am the curator, Garrett Chaffin-Quiray. Today we have a conversation with a friend, Ed Rosa.
That's me. Hi. My filmmaking partner and I have a YouTube channel, Toothless Richard Productions, where you can see a number of our short films.
In our back and forth, you pitched me the idea of deliberate controversy. So what does that mean to you?
Great art should provoke. It isn't up to people to tell the artist what they want. So looking at films where the filmmaker seems to have gone out of their way to be deliberately provocative for one reason or another. And the films we'll be watching are Dragged Across Concrete, Last Tango in Paris, Ilsa, She-Wolf of the SS, Basic Instinct, Monty Python's Life of Brian, The Last Temptation of Christ, Bamboozled, and 2000 Mules.
Ilsa, She-Wolf of the SS is a terrible, terrible movie. But it's also connected with some real aspects of the history of World War II, in particular concentration camps. And we're confronted with a red screen, white typescript.
The film you are about to see is based upon documented fact. The atrocities shown were conducted as medical experiments in special concentration camps throughout Hitler's Third Reich. Although these crimes against humanity are historically accurate, the characters depicted are composites of notorious Nazi personalities, and the events portrayed have been condensed into one locality for dramatic purposes. Because of its shocking subject matter, this film is restricted to adult audiences only. We dedicate this film with the hope that these heinous crimes will never occur again. Herman Traeger, producer.
Let's note that Herman Traeger is not a real person. It's the pseudonym of the actual producer of the movie, whose name is David F. Friedman. And of course, we immediately go into a scene of sex making in the bedroom of the commander, Ilsa, in charge of the concentration camp. Oh. Yeah. We are in the early 70s, when a person's ability to find pornography was defined by having to go into public, having to then risk shame and embarrassment and many dollars, because the markups were severe, to go into a theater, to go into a specialized bookstore, procure the material, and maybe be able to bring it home, but most likely view it in public with other shamefaced and embarrassed people, largely menfolk. Mm-hmm. That's the condition of watching this movie. What's off-putting and strange, because you go in with the expectation you're going to see a lot of skin, and you do, is the movie also takes a lot of time and energy to show a lot of exploitive violence, cruelty, bloodshed. Concentration camp victims were subjected in some occasions to terrible torturous violence for fun by sadistic guards, sometimes for medical research, thus the Mengele sort of experience in the concentration camp he was in charge of, with the effort of transforming this pain and suffering inflicted on inmates into a useful military technology that the Reich could use and advance its armies and destroy the world. Mm-hmm. That's all real. So when we watch in the course of this movie, Ilsa, She-Wolf of the SS, that there are female inmates subjected to intense heat, pressure, violent cutting, and other things, it's to figure out a way to make German soldiers in the field outlast the difficulties of being in war.
Right.
And that's true. Cut. We look at people humping.
Right. I think that the sex and the violence for a lot of people is kind of titillating in the same way. You know, I mean, this film is not the only one of its type.
What's interesting also is the technology employed to render a body that's naked on screen is as cheap as you can be. If somebody will disrobe, you've got the greatest special effect the world has ever created. And the blood effects that are used here and the violence that we witness is largely caked on makeup, which doesn't look true, but it's accompanied by screaming. These are very low-rent things. In fact, one of the takeaways I had watching the whole movie is that you and I, Ed, should remake this tomorrow. Because we have the advancement of tools in our phones that could make this kind of thing more renderable,
Yeah.
more lovely. We've got collectively enough skill, mostly it's you, I would just cheerlead. If we can find people who will disrobe, we've got something.
There's got to be a filter
Yeah.
that we can just apply that'll, make them naked or, cover them in blood. I'm sure the next iPhone update will feature those.
I hope that
those
it
filters.
does. So that definitely was on my mind. The amateurish quality of much of this movie, and in my researches, I think I read that this movie took 9 days to make. And it's only about 96 minutes long, which is probably a half hour too much. There's still a plotting quality to setting up the activity, because there is a plot here we have to unravel, we can speak of in a moment. But that plot is just thin enough to really not require more than an episode of TV, marked by these terrible bouts of violence and then the humping.
Right. It's funny because this film actually reminded me of the film Drum from 1976, which was sort of the sequel to Mandingo. Basically, it's the same film. It's a concentration camp versus a plantation in the pre-Civil War South, where human bodies are basically a commodity that are there for the use of their would-be superiors. And during their time there, they're subjected to much violence and sex.
Yeah.
And then, in the end, spoiler alert, there's an uprising where the victims, the inmates of both places, find a way to overthrow their nefarious captors.
Let's get back to how this movie can be interpreted as a dynamic of power and of sexual prowess and of skill and other things which are sort of in the deep structure of how movie narratives work. In a nutshell, this thing is about a concentration camp lorded over by a sexed-up woman named Ilsa, who brings in female inmates upon whom she wishes to do experiments and uncover her thesis, which is that women can tolerate pain better and should belong to the front field of soldiers facing the enemy because she wants to bring about Nazi victory. And she uses the male inmates for physical labor on the camp and then to offer her sex at night. If they can't satisfy her, and nobody can, she has them castrated and killed on a slab, and we watch them bleed out.
Right.
Great fun! The trouble is, she meets a woman in her newest group of inmates who seems with an absolute limit of tolerance for pain. Ilsa can't break her, so she punishes her more and more and more. And there's a dude in the fresh group of fellas who is an American German studying in Germany, swept up by the Nazis and put into this camp, who can only ejaculate when he wants to.
His tolerance for pleasure is like her tolerance for pain.
And so Ilsa finds herself just all on Twitter. How am I going to solve this dilemma of breaking this woman? Although if she can't be broken, she is the evidence required to say women should be in the front line of our soldiers. And how can I break this man? But do I want to?
Right.
She winningly at one point says,
"When victory comes, we shall make children. They will be beautiful. And strong."
He alone, among all of the men in her camp, is able to bring her to orgasm. He alone is untouched and uncut. He's allowed to return to her bed night after night. In the conclusion of the movie, her commanding officer, the general, shows up. She shows him her experiments. He seems impressed. There's the uprising you described a moment ago, and then she is tied up by this American as a form of sex play. One of the general's underlings finds out what's happened, shoots her, and then burns down the whole concentration camp to withhold the evidence that women might be useful as frontline soldiers and that there was ever an uprising. I've said more than is necessary. This is all about watching a lot of naked women, a few naked men interact, suffer pain and pleasure, and then watching everything blow up in the end.
I can't help but come away with thinking about this subtext of like American supremacy, comparing Wolf to like the general. He's corpulent, he's boorish, he's gross, he's submissive. When he's able to be intimate with this domineering, gorgeous woman, whereas the American is, he's fit, he's tall, he's confident, he looks good. He wants to give her pleasure. If you need more sex, I'll be right outside digging graves.
peeling away some layers. This movie plays a lot like it's the MASH backlot when Hawkeye was off scene and this was happening on the next camp over.
Yeah.
And we know that this was shot on the leftover set from Hogan's Heroes.
Right.
And I understand that they made a deal, the producers with the owners of the site, because in the script, they do burn it all down. They're like, you're going to save us the trouble on your dime. Great, because we want to get rid of it.
Do it.
So it's Hogan's Heroes meets MASH,
Yeah.
at least in tone, because after all, we're supposed to be somewhere in deep northern Germany. But it very much looks like Southern California. We even see power poles. You see the Nazi flag. You see uniforms which look generally legitimate.
Yeah.
And there's the impression that there are German soldiers hemming in these prisoners. But then there's this thorny problem, and that is Ilsa is the dominant personality. Ilsa's got a thing for this character Wolf, played by Gregory Knopf. But we need to really spend our time thinking about Diane Thorne as Ilsa. Something that the Nazi army figured out in the 1930s was that when people look like a conforming group of rad soldiers, they behave like rad soldiers.
Yeah.
A discipline that requires that they do certain things in a certain way with uniformity, thus the uniform.
Yeah.
Capped by a steel helmet with a very strict way the body fits. Only certain bodies go into these uniforms and so on. It raises up the idea of what fascism ought to look like, giving it visual trophies that become fetish items. Another layer. I first became aware of the idea that Nazi iconography, like the uniform, could be part of sex play and sexual desire with Kenneth Anger's Scorpio Rising. That independent underground movie uses costumes on male bodies to appeal to male appetites. This movie replays that from an entirely different angle, but it still has a queer subtext. What am I saying? More $10 words. Well, Diane Thorne as Ilsa, she's tall, she's curvy, she's packed in her uniforms super tight, she has blonde hair, she's an S&M priestess.
Yeah.
She dominates everybody and has the ability to pursue life and death consequences for anybody who pisses her off. And she does. Professionally, she wants to demonstrate that her sex, woman, is stronger than man. Sexually, she wants men to gratify her, but seems to be pretty interested in scopophilia. She likes to watch pain, suffering, and affection. Gets her off. All of these things can't help but be connected to the fact she's always wearing a Nazi uniform, except for a couple of scenes where she's nude or in her underpants.
Right. Yeah.
So all of that kind of sticks to my mind, that Nazism and Nazi exploitation, which this movie sort of typifies, that form of using these icons to suggest characters without having to create depth or psychological resonance with actors who can't act, is enough in a visual field to say, Nazis bad, ooh, but I'm turned on.
Yeah.
And I have to imagine that a lot of people stumbling into this movie theater back in 75 when this movie comes out were struck by that too. Ooh, it's gross. Look at the terrible suffering that she's inflicting. But man, look at the boobs.
Yeah. Right.
And being really conflicted over that. We're
Right.
not supposed to like the suffering, but look at the boobs.
But right.
We're not supposed to enjoy the flaying of flesh, but look at the sex.
Right.
And on from there.
Yeah.
These things then are twinned in a way that's really gooey. And on the one hand, I can't help but notice things that I find interesting, attractive, and wonderful. But I'm also disgusted by the fact that that appetite, that sexual charge that the nude body carries for me, can be turned by a thoughtful, though not very skilled filmmaker into something that's kind of atrocious and yet still exciting. Thus, Ilsa She-Wolf of the SS.
Yeah.
Are there other layers like that trouble you about this movie?
Throughout my life, as you mentioned, we sort of have had tons and tons of different films using Nazis and Nazi iconography in some capacity. So I feel like I'm a little desensitized to it. I sort of see the Nazis as, I don't know, we're so far removed, it's almost like they're made up in a way.
Well, they're placeholders in the world of today. As you say, we're far too young to know anything directly about the war.
Yeah.
I had a grandpa, both grandpas, who were in it.
Yeah,
in some
I had
capacity,
one that fought in it too, yeah.
But I didn't have very direct conversations with either of them while they were living.
Oh, my grandfather wouldn't talk about it. It was so traumatic for him, he wouldn't talk about it, which I respect, but then also am bummed because...
What can I learn about this? Or what's important to know?
Nobody else in the universe had his experiences and his perspective. And that goes for anybody that fought in it.
Yeah.
And so in a way to like not talk about it and to not pass those on, you're sort of denying posterity information that once you're gone is irreplaceable.
Well, and this movie is made not even 30 years from the end of that war, so many living people, and I'm imagining most of the principal crew members are probably of an age where they remember.
Yeah.
Some of them may have been in it. And so they're making this gigantic phantasmagoria of pornography mixed with war in a concentration camp, knowing exactly how all of that would resonate, particularly as people in the 1970s, Gentiles definitely, were starting to come to grips with the fact that there was this targeted mechanism called the Final Solution to destroy Jewry of Europe. Mm-hmm. So it's a chewy, weird kind of a thing. During the 70s, I know there was also an effort to bring to justice the former leaders of the Nazi Party who had instigated the Final Solution and had fled to parts of South America to live their days. That becomes dramatized in a movie like Marathon Man, which I know about, which informs me about the basis of this experience, because I wasn't there. I wasn't directly knowledgeable.
Right. Well, it's interesting, too, because while this is, a fantastical, sort of reproduction of what didn't happen in World War II exactly, the atrocities they speak of. If you really do sort of study or look into kind of the atrocities that were committed under, medical pretenses, it really is pretty horrifying. And this film, as far as I know, when it comes to that stuff, is really not that far off the mark. I find, like, when I watch this, I am like intensely repulsed by the violence, even though we're sort of revisionizing this and titillating you with all of this sex stuff. I found myself reflecting on that during the film, like, and just being upset that anybody would ever have had to go through the kind of stuff that the real victims did go through.
So let me be specific about how this movie makes that evident, because I agree with you. When our new group of female inmates are brought to their bunkhouse, they meet the inmates who were already there, and we learn that one of them has been given syphilis, and it's rotting away her flesh.
Yeah.
It's not very good makeup, but I know that happened from my own private research. What is the effect of an STD unchecked?
Yeah, it's good enough to just be disturbing.
Yeah. These things, they actually happen.
Right.
And we're watching this just sort of be thrown in there, chum in the water, so to speak, to get us to the next scene of violence or perverse sex or plot as these enslaved concentration camp victim inmates determine a way to escape. There are a couple of scenes of rape. There are various scenes of sexual assault. And I know that happened, especially because there wasn't somebody you could tap out and say, hey, listen, I got to talk to the warden. I'm being mistreated.
Right. It was almost as if they were trained to, like, be as sadistic as possible, or at least that's what it seems like based on, like, the fiction that I've consumed.
Yeah.
In fact, it made me, because there's another film that sort of goes hand in hand with this one as well, the Men Behind the Sun, which is basically like China's version of this, only there's no sex.
It's meant to be a realistic portrait of...
yeah, it details sort of... Japan had this Unit 731 that was stationed in Japan, or in China during World War II, where it was like the Japanese Dr. Mengele.
Okay.
And the Japanese were doing these similar kinds of medical experiments, in quotes, on Chinese people. It's really weird to me that you could have so many people be so on board with being so sadistic.
Mm-hmm. I came at this problem from maybe a higher end kind of a reference point, and that is I'm aware of Hannah Arendt. Are you aware of her?
I don't know. I don't think so.
She's, I think, a German-born philosopher. She was a Jewish person who swept through Europe and just barely avoided being sent to one of these kinds of, not this kind, but to a concentration camp by dint of a lot of interesting accidents that finally helped her arrive in New York City in the early 1940s. She wrote a very influential book about Adolf Eichmann and trying to think about why it is and how it is that the most advanced, literally the most advanced Western civilization then in the world, Germany,
Right.
could turn around and do this mechanized form of human destruction called the final solution. And her, I think part of her thesis is the effort to conduct the final solution and build these concentration camps made a lot of laboring warriors, soldiers, have to go become guards. Now that is laid over the top of a largely compliant group of citizens who were Jewish, yes, but were not opposed to the German state and presented no rebellion and no resistance to the rise of Adolf Hitler. Consequently, to ritualistically destroy these people was a choice that was by its nature irrational and ran against the best laid plans of Hitler's global conquest.
Yeah.
Had he not engaged in the final solution, it's entirely possible more manpower could actually maybe have pushed back the Russian army.
Right.
More manpower could have been sent to try to conquer England. So there's levels of waste and indifference piled on top of itself, and at the bottom, of course, is the other group you name as bad. So homosexual people, Jewish people, the Roma, and others would be grouped into this category in their millions, requiring hundreds of thousands of bureaucrats and military officials to govern and run these camps, just to do things like build fences. So all of that was a little bit on my mind because this is obviously a deliberately very adult kind of live-action cartoon about how you take all of these issues of the concentration camp and you blow them out for extremists to then appeal to the raincoater crowd in the 70s that wants to masturbate in the back of a theater.
Right.
And yet, even though this exploitative movie is silly, it brings a lot of these things and it bubbles them all up.
Yeah.
Because if you are in the condition where you are one of the guards who was trained to go to war, you're not allowed to go to war. You're instead made a camp guard and an official where you're literally being asked to conduct yourself and decide who gets to live as your inmates and who gets to die. Have them dig a ditch, have them burn their friends, have them have sex with you, or you're going to shoot them. What would it be like to do twin experiments? Maybe we should graft a finger onto somebody's hand. Why not? There's no consequence.
Right.
These people are beneath contempt. Why? Because the state told me so. And that sort of heritage, that foundation, that wellspring, as dreadful as it is, does allow this kind of a fantasy to percolate, bubble up, and become a fountain that we're now talking about.
Yeah. I mean, it's traumatizing.
So there are a couple of odd spots in the movie where it accidentally lands on something poignant. One is whenever Ilsa is getting further proofs to her way of thinking that women are stronger than men and should be validated as future soldiers, she says out loud things like,
I think we have found the one, Vince. The one that we have been waiting for.
She is, on paper, so sort of pro-woman, but then also routinely engages in the utter dehumanization of women and seems to delight in it.
And then finally, she's just lady on her back when Wolf proves to be the greatest lover ever who cannot come,
Right.
but can cause her endless orgasms to the point of exhaustion. There was another little odd bit of poignancy, and again, these are bad actors, but one of the inmates who has been there for a long time, Kata is I think her name, she's the one who's syphilitic.
Right.
When the uprising is basically successful, they all are armed now. The guards who haven't been killed have been brought into, they've been brought out in front of the camp headquarters, laid on the ground at gunpoint, and Wolf says, let's all escape now. And Kata says, no, we need our revenge.
Yeah.
Strikes me as absolutely correct.
Yeah, totally. I was like, what the hell are you talking about, Wolf? Like,
These people harmed us. I will die from syphilis. Look at my face.
right. My life is basically over
Yeah.
at this point. Like, I'm not going to let these people slide.
And then it's just a shooting in a barrel, killing everybody. But Wolf wanders away with his lady love, Rosette.
In what might be the most underbaked romance in the history of cinema.
They suddenly are just in love.
Right, like, okay. Maybe all the scenes of them hanging out and getting into each other wound up on the cutting room floor.
Right, because they seem to exchange a few words, and then suddenly they want to run off as a couple.
Right.
And then the last shot of the movie, we see them on a hill
in the
looking
Hollywood.
at the burning... Yeah.
in the valley or whatever,
Right,
Burbank.
watching the burning fort. When Ilsa is called to give the general a golden shower,
Right.
she seems to cry.
It's because it is a metaphor for the weakness of German men.
Okay.
Which is why,
Okay, good.
Which is why she's doing these experiments in the first place. She's weeping for Germany.
This movie was a four-wall treat to exploitation cinema. You rent the facility, and then whoever wants to come, you just charge them, and that goes right to the distributor.
Right.
The guy who's behind this, Friedman, the producer, was apparently a very good salesman, very good at promoting his movie products based on his career before movies, I think promoting other kinds of products, but realized that he's got something here with movies. The more exciting, the more literally titillating they can be, the more obnoxious, the more reputationally suspect, the easier it will be to get people in the door. And so made a real specialty of four-walling this thing. And I'm sure that's why it was very, very successful. In the same 6 months or so that this movie is released, in January of 1975, already in theaters, was the movie Emmanuel, Black Christmas, and Godfather Part 2 had been released just before Christmas. That's sitting out there to sort of mark what's going on. We get Teenage Seductress right alongside this one in January. By the time we roll around to March, we have Sheba Baby, a Pam Grier vehicle filled with a lot of nudity.
Yeah.
We get Super Vixens from Russ Meyer in April. We get Dolomite.
Another four-walled classic.
Right. Then we get Monty Python and the Holy Grail in April, and we conclude in May with Switchblade Sisters and The Happy Hooker.
We get a lot of trash. A
lot of
great
trash
at this time.
And I don't think any of those titles really rise up above the quality of this movie, with a couple of exceptions. You could argue, certainly, about the value of Monty Python or Godfather. They're a different kind of film entertainment. But the rest of these movies are going to have moments that you can remember, and objectionable material that you would think is objectionable, and then a lot of stuff just kind of happens. So this movie, as weird as it is, and as reputationally challenging as it is to us today, was not exceptional for its time.
Right.
We've just chosen, because we're smart guys, to pull this one off the shelf of history and give it some loving attention through this podcast, and we're not wrong to do so. It presents a lot of thorny things, and here is an important detail. You know the actress who plays the character Anna? Anna is this pain-withholding woman who Ilsa can't break?
Right.
That actress is Maria Marks. That is the former wife of Melvin Van Peebles and the mother of Mario.
Oh, wow.
Right in the middle of
Crazy.
this movie, we're watching a pioneering adjacency to one of the most important careers of black American movies, Melvin Van Peebles. They, by this point, in the middle 70s, they were probably divorced.
Right.
I don't know the exact timeline of that. But something about her was familiar, and I was ferreting around the web trying to find some things, and that's the familiarity.
Okay.
Who spends a lot of her time in the nude. You might recall that at a certain point, the tortures that Ilsa is visiting on several female inmates includes electrodes attached to their bodies.
Yes.
Electrodes attached to their nipples.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Our Lady Anna, this woman I'm speaking of, lies out, tied to a slab. She is placed on the nipples with electrodes, but one is tied to her pubic hair, as if that's where the clitoris is,
right.
I guess.
Well, maybe it's just the pubic hair is so highly conductive. You send that shock right to the danger zone.
Boop boopity doo.